Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show today. It's great to be back with you again with a favorite guest today. We've got Neil McCoy-Ward. We're going to be talking about preparing for tomorrow, although with what's going in the world at the moment, it could be called preparing for today. As there's an awful lot going on right now globally, wherever you are in the world, welcome. We're going to be talking today with Neil about, as I say, preparing for tomorrow. And there's just been so much going on, hasn't there, since we last had Neil on the show. It was September last year. He talked about various situations and kind of scenarios, and they've come true. We're now in March of 2022, and there's tension across the globe. Economically, there are challenges. Prices are being hiked. We're talking about inflation, lots of issues. And I've known Neil actually for many years, really. We met in the Speaking Association, I'm guessing probably 8-10 years ago, something like that. And at that point, I met Neil. He was a multiple business owner. He was into property. He had all sorts of retail companies, and quite an unassuming man in some ways, but with enormous ethic and an ability to transform and develop results. And somebody I realized that I got a lot of wisdom. And since then, Neil has kind of reinvented himself. He's much more into kind of research and economics, and he's studying what's going on globally. He travels around the globe to get the latest insights. And I think something that's very interesting with Neil, through my line, this is the 454th interview I've done on Voice America, so unique one, so quite a few now. And I would say over my years, I've met one or two people who I would say could be described as conspiracy theorists. And I have to say, the people that I've met who I really do take information from with a bit of a pinch of salt. Sometimes it can make sense, but it's quite scary. It's quite daunting. But I don't put Neil in that space at all. I think on the BBC a couple of years ago, he was identified as somebody who, with that kind of label. But what has happened with Neil is that over the last couple of years, he's been proved right. And that's pretty scary, actually, but he's been proved right. And I think with the amount of insight and his travel and his wisdom and knowledge, I think and his military background as well, he's somebody to listen to consider, and to carefully think through your own life as to whether what he's sharing could help you secure your future, improve your life, and your business, really. So he's the CEO of Forward Thinking Group UK. He, as I've mentioned, he has businesses in all sorts of areas, investment and housing markets. He's got a massive social media following. People are following his advice and working all over the globe. I mean, I looked this morning, people from Lebanon, all over the world are commenting and reviewing on his videos. So let's talk about preparing for tomorrow, or perhaps today. A big welcome to Neil McCoy-Ward.
Yeah, Chris, that's going to be hard to live up to all of that. So I'm going to do my best now.
Well, you've been on once. I mean, what I do really respect about you is that, you're out there and you really are sharing your views and opinions, and you're not afraid of doing that. And you do it in a very, very compelling, but I think unassuming way. And I really admire that. And, I think, I often take these things with a pinch of salt, but a lot of what you have shared so far already has come true, and therefore I think you deserve that accolade. And I suppose the challenge is wherever you put yourself out there, you'll have people who disagree with you too. So I imagine you have a little bit of that too. But I think you're a man that's worth following and worth listening to.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. So tell us, you were on the show back in September. And I wonder what's been happening to you since then in your life. What's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what we talked about in September. There was probably a lot of things, but it's good to hear you said that they've come true, whatever it was I forecast back then. But one of the things I know I mentioned to you off air was that I was thinking about moving on from the UK. I wasn't happy to be stuck in a big city there. I could just see the writing on the wall. And I could see a lot of things changing that I wasn't happy with. And also in society, I was having I've seen a lot of societal issues, a lot of crime increases. I have friends who are in police and things like that. There was a lot of things changing that they would always tell me about. So I decided that, well, the main thing was I was going to be buying a farm in the USA. Now that hasn't transpired at this time. So I moved to the Isle of Man instead, where they welcomed me with open arms. So I went to the Isle of Man. So this is where I now live. And I've been here since the 1st of February, and it is absolutely fantastic. I think actually they did me a favor with the USA. So I'm really glad to actually be here. It's fantastic. And I'm actually going to be standing down from my CEO role very shortly now. I'm just handing over the reins to somebody else. But that's mainly it, just keeping on with the YouTube channel and the private community. Just past 304,000 members, actually, subscribers. So things are sort of growing quite exponentially at the moment.
Yeah. Well, you're right on topic right now, aren't you, with the things that you talk about?
Yeah.
And I think that's both smart, but I know, everything you do is heavily researched. So I just, I've got to ask you really, what is your perspective? What's going on right now? It's a huge question, I know.
I won't go into every last detail of what I think is going on, because I think most people listening will just think it's crazy talk in terms of some of the real depths of what's happening. But I'm happy to talk about stuff that people will be able to at least question and accept. But we are in the fourth sort of secular. So what we have is we have cycles in the world, and you can trace these back thousands of years. And it depends which sort of model you want to follow. There's different models. Howe and Strauss did one called the fourth turning. That's one of the best ones that I really like. And we are in the fourth turning. And I remember a couple of years back saying that COVID wasn't it. It was just the very beginning of the fourth turning, of this fourth cycle. I said, that's not it. You're going to see a lot more come after the whole COVID crisis. And it's really funny as well that people were talking about that lasting 4 or 5 years. I said, I think 2 years. 2 years it will last, and then there'll be something else come up. Now, I didn't know it was going to be Russia and Ukraine. I had absolutely no idea. A lot of people keep asking me this. Did you know this? Didn't know. I didn't make any investments based on this, or I knew nothing about that aspect. I mean, if I thought there was going to be conflict militarily, I would have if I had to put money on it, I would have put it on China and Taiwan more than Russia and Ukraine. So that did come as somewhat of a surprise to me. Although I knew there was some conflict there with everything going on. I knew there was some conflict with everything going on in that region, and with NATO, and Putin wasn't happy about NATO, and I knew there was a lot going on, and I didn't know how that was gonna actually end up. But this is where we are. We're not over yet. There is a lot more to come yet, because you see, every crisis has a knock-on effect and usually draws in 2 or 3 other crises with it. And this is how you form crises, and they converge. And I actually made a video talking about there's more than 20 crises at the moment, crises actually converging all at the same time around the Russia. And this is just the Russia-Ukraine. We're not even talking about COVID and the health crisis and the lockdowns and all these other things. These are separate. So all of these things are converging. Now, I think the most worrying thing for everyone to be aware of is what's happening with food at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. And whenever I see an alert or something put out by, say, the UK Farmers Union, or Farms in America, Farmers Union, and they say, we need to warn the people, we need to warn the government, energy costs have skyrocketed so much that we either need subsidies or we're going to have to cut back 50% of what we grow. And then they give different ones. And then they talk about ammonium nitrate and all these other things, potash and things that they just cannot get because it's just so expensive and in short supply. And yet, where do these stories go? Why doesn't the media push it out there? Why is it nowhere to be seen? Why doesn't the government act upon it? I remember making a video saying, we are about to go into a crisis, an absolute crisis, if something isn't done about energy production in the UK, because they were blowing up all the coal plants. They blew up loads of them. And I said, okay, fine, if you want to reduce carbon emissions and everything else, but at least have somewhere else you're going to be getting your energy from. Don't just rely on it all from Russia and other places. That's crazy to have no, sort of production of energy. Build some nuclear plants, at the least do something to have some energy reliance. No, instead they do absolutely nothing. They wait until a crisis comes and then they say, oh, we better do something about it. Of course, let's link that into inflation at the moment. If you listen to any of the media, you listen to politicians, they are blaming all this inflation right now on 2 or 3 things. Number one is Putin invading Ukraine. And this is what I don't get. This inflation has been going on for a year or 2. The invasion didn't happen, a month ago. How? It makes no sense, but the people don't question it. They say, oh, well, that's what it is. It's Putin. He's caused. Oh, for goodness sake. And then what else have you got? You've got company price gouging, as they say. No, it's not companies price gouging. Some companies obviously are going to take advantage of the situation, but a lot of it is higher input costs via energy, via staff. I saw the governor of the Bank of England. He was blaming inflation on greedy workers, employees wanting pay rises. And it's not as if these were high pay rises. People were asking for 4 or 5%. He said, this greedy, these people are so greedy. And yet, just this week in the US, they just added, I think it was 20% to the politicians' expenses. 20%. And yet they say inflation 7.9%, which it's not. They've manipulated the CPI. If they still use the same CPI from the 1980s, inflation would be about 15 to 16% today. So it's not the highest in 40 years. It's the highest in all of our lifetimes.
My word. So it's complicated, isn't it? There's a lot of different factors. And as you mentioned there, the fourth turning. And after we last spoke, I read the fourth turning. I confess, if anybody buys it and reads it, I particularly digest the first chapter, and I think it was the last one, because it's quite complicated history in there. But I really got the message with it. There's an awful lot going on. I guess out of all of that, what we have to maybe do is think about ourselves and think about how, because we can't control all of that. And I notice you using the word they quite a bit in there. We've got to think a bit about ourselves too, haven't we? About how do we survive going forward? And I guess that's where some of your work comes in. Changing the macro is quite hard.
Yeah. Well, the challenge is a lot of the people who can change this won't change it.
Yes.
And it's a bit of a, old boys club, as it were. So because they have so much power and wealth and control, they don't want to change the system, because if they change the system, you're going to have a bigger middle class. You're going to bring people out of poverty. And it sounds crazy, but they don't want that. They want to keep it as it is, where they have huge amount of wealth and control. You see, Jerome Powell just did a speech, a couple of days ago, basically FOMC meeting, talking about all the stuff. And he said quite clearly in there, if inflation gets out of control, we will use our tools to control it, bring it back down to 2%. He's been saying this for 6 months. If he was going to use those tools, he would have done it by now.
Yes.
I mean, how the highest level in 40 years, or the highest level in our lifetimes, if you measure it accurately, at what point does he think it's out of control? If that isn't out of control, I don't want to know what is out of control. Is he talking about hyperinflation, where we have 100% inflation every couple of weeks? Is that out of control? I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose. But surely there's a risk with hyperinflation that it diminishes some of their assets?
Not really, because if you look at history, and you can go and look at lots of different historical accounts here. If you think about, we talked about this, gold and silver and property and things like that. All that happens is if you go into a hyperinflationary scenario, all this stuff becomes more valuable.
Yes.
Now you've got to think about the word value and valuable. The semantics of that word, a lot of people just assume it means dollars or pounds or euros and things like that. But no, value is what people place upon an item or a thing or a service or anything really. So what happens is that a new currency would come along. I mean, if you think about the Weimar Republic, they had two currencies running at one time. At some point, I think it was something like the Reitenmark or the Rentenmark, something like that, alongside their mark, their currency. So these sort of things happen all the time. And then what usually happens once you come out of the period is the wealthy elite have got all of these assets because they've just scooped them all up using whatever they had at the time. And then you have a huge wealth divide. And of course, what does a wealth divide lead to? 19 times out of 20, it becomes riots and revolutions and the French Revolution and all these other things.
Oh, so you've just given us something else to worry about now. Next, that's COVID, war, riots.
Yeah, food's the thing people should be worried about right now.
Yeah.
Making sure they've got some, even if it's just having allotments or a vegetable garden or they've got some food, saved up, something like that. These are the sort of things people should be thinking about. Even if this period only lasts for a few months, well, a few months is a long time when you need something to eat.
Yes. Yeah. So you think it's that serious right now?
Not yet, but it will be. I do think it will be within. I don't know how long. I don't have a time frame on that. Could be a couple of years, could be a few years, but I do think we're going to have some issues.
Right. Okay. Some of the things we need to consider about our own kind of investments and ensuring our money is we've got money there for our retirement, as well as some of the more practical things like we just talked about food there. But should we be having some cash hidden away, scribbled under our floorboards, in case something happens to the banking system? Just before the break, Neil, we talked a bit about food and your worry, your belief that we're going to have real food shortages. It makes complete sense what you're saying. It's already starting to kind of happen. Should we be stockpiling food? How much food should we stockpile, and what sort of food? I mean, you could fill a room up with tins, couldn't you? But what would you advise that people to have in?
Yeah, sure. Well, a couple of things we should probably just mention first off. Number one, I get attacked over this very heavily when I talk about stockpiling food.
Yeah.
It's one of the big ones people really go after me for. But if you think about it logically, people have been stockpiling food for thousands or hundreds of years. When you had to, if you think back to the early days, 1900 in America, when people were crossing the plains and things like that, of course people would have food. Most people that live rurally anywhere around the world now that don't go to the supermarket every couple of days, of course they're going to have a pantry or a storage unit. They're going to have food stocked up in there, a couple of chest freezers, things like that. So it's natural to most people who live rurally. But unfortunately now we have this sort of propaganda, I guess we can say, that says it's wrong, it's immoral to have more than a couple of days of food at home, which it isn't. It isn't immoral. It isn't all the reasons they come up with. Oh, you're stealing from others by having more than a couple of days, and all these campaigns. It's a shame really that we're at this stage in the world now. But that's the first thing I've got to mention there. Now, what sort of food should people stockpile? And again, the second point I want to just mention before that, there's always going to be food. That's the point. There's always going to be food. If you look at developing nations now, where there's a lot of starvation, of course, none of this is anywhere to be seen, but there is a lot of starvation. There's been a lot more in the last couple of years into the COVID era as well. But there's always food available It's just whether or not you can afford to buy that food. I did a research piece on a couple of countries within Africa. I won't go into each country specifically and things, but we were looking at the markets and the prices and things like that. Some of these prices were up 200, 300% on a single food item. So it wasn't that the food wasn't there. It was just that it was so expensive, people couldn't afford it. So we're not going to see all the food just disappear, just to clarify. But what we are going to see is there's going to be less affordability for that food, which is going to be shorter in supply. You look at Ukraine and Russia, actually. Why is Ukraine known as the breadbasket? Because where there's a lot of wheat and other staples come from, it comes from that region. Now, with the conflict there, you're going to see less of an output. So these are the sort of things. Now, what do you keep at home? What sort of food? Well, the most obvious and the cheapest amount of calories anyone's ever going to get is one of those huge sacks of rice, one of those sort of things, a couple of those. But no, there's a lot of things. But unfortunately, a lot of people buy items that only last for 3 or 4 months. These are not the things you want to have. You want to have really good dry foods that you can cook up. And that's the other thing, Chris, as well, is water. People say, well, I've got a few bottles of water stored up. No. You're thinking completely wrong. I remember as a soldier, when I had to do the sort of work I had to do, we would never take water, large quantities with us. We might have a few liters, something like that, a gallon maybe. You wouldn't take any more than that with you. What you would take is you would purify your water with you, filtration systems, purification systems. That is what you would do. So when people say, oh, I've got this water stored at home, I just think, okay, that's going to last you a week, 2 weeks, and then you're in big trouble. No, get a standalone water filtration system. There's a lot of brands that you can use. Berkey is probably one of the most popular and the most expensive one, but there's a lot of things that people can do. So, I mean, this is just a tiered system here. We can go all the way up, we can go all the way down with what people can do.
What about cash? In one of your videos, I noticed you talk about having some cash stashed at home.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to. If you look at what happened in Canada recently, where there was all the issues with the banking and people's accounts getting frozen because they donated to truckers and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, this actually happened. I actually have right now still 3 of my bank accounts frozen. I don't know if you're aware of that. 3 of them are frozen. I can't access them. It's very difficult. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that, and this is the problem with emergency powers, they, once a government gets these emergency powers, they never give them back. And people say, oh, yes, they've just given them back. Yeah, they've changed all the laws under the emergency powers. Then they've given the powers back. That's not giving the powers back. Okay, a lot of people just can't see through it. But look at what's happening in Russia, Ukraine. People couldn't get cash out the banks. You only have to look in the UK and other countries now, America, a lot of countries, all these bank branch closures. HSBC has just announced another 69 this week. They did 82 last year in 2021. And they say it's because people just don't want to use the banks anymore. Everyone, I love that word, everyone wants digital. They want to do it digitally. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of old people who do not have a smartphone, do not have a laptop. They do not want to be buying a smartphone or a laptop to do their banking online. They probably don't even know what a login is. So I don't believe it. I think we're going towards this cashless society. They don't want people to have cash. And because again, this is all about control. The governments and these other organizations, they basically feel like, for whatever reason, that they need to control the people because the people are causing a lot of problems. So they need to control this themselves. And that's their solution to everything. So yeah, I definitely have cash. I definitely recommend people keep cash, whatever that is for each person comfortably, because when you need that cash and the bank branch closes, whenever this happens in the future, you're not going to be able to get your cash out. This has happened over and over again. It's called bail-in law. People think this is a conspiracy. This was another one I got hit over. Conspiracy. And then people started looking into it and went, oh, actually, no, this is a law, a new law passed in the G20 countries. It exists everywhere, America, UK, all the Western countries. It's called bail-in law. What this means is that a bank can bail in the money in your bank account rather than do a bailout, because the government found out the hard way. Okay, we bailed out all the banks and insurance companies and everyone in 2008. You know what happened with Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and all this sort of stuff crashing. They knew this time they couldn't do a bailout again. So what they've come up with is a socialist system, as it were, called bail-in. So they are going to take people's money over and above a certain amount in the bank account and give them worthless bank stock in return. Now, people say, well, my bank's huge, it's not going to be affected. No. Look into fractional reserve banking. Look at the levels. You put $10 or £10 or euros into a bank account, they're going to lend out £100 or dollars or euros on that. That money that you've put in is not there. It's just a digital number on a ledger. That money isn't there. It's already gone out and been turned into credit and debt and been loaned out on mortgages and credit cards and business loans and all this sort of thing. So when the liquidity crisis comes and things start crashing, people are not going to know what's hit them. They're going to say, oh, what's happened? I can't understand all of this. This is what's going to happen. They say, what? Wow, I can't believe it. Even though I've been warning people about it for years.
So you've now got me thinking, how much cash should people hold?
Whatever they're comfortable with.
Because presumably with inflation, it's also diminishing.
Correct. So if you look at the 1980s figures, your cash in the bank has lost 15% purchasing power just in the last year. Yeah. And then what did it lose the year before? So people who are, and this is the thing that annoys me, you have people that are, and I do believe most people are good people. I do hold that belief. The majority of people are good people. It doesn't matter where they are in the world, whether they're in America or England or UK, even people, the average everyday person in Russia who are under a lot of attack at the moment. Most people, most family people, they care about one thing. They care about their husband, their wife, and their children, their parents, and whoever else. Family. We demonize people in the media, and we say, oh, we come up with this image of a person, say this is an evil person or whatever. No, it's all part of all of these strategies, to move all these agendas forward. Most people are good people.
Yeah.
And I really do hold that belief.
Yeah. They just want a roof over their head, be able to feed themselves, get on well with their neighbors, maybe have a holiday, cover the bills, look after the kids. Wherever I've traveled in the world, I've met wonderful people. And actually not been exposed to lots of crime, been fortunate. But a lot of good people out there. We've got 3 minutes till commercial break, but we should probably talk about our money and our, kind of investments and our future in terms of our pensions. If we're going to lose a lot of value, there's a risk with banks. Do we try and, where we can, avoid some of our wealth being in banks? Where do we start with this conversation? Where do you prefer to start?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I have 15 different bank accounts, which is a lot of bank accounts. I did have 18. Wow. I'm just opening 2 more up at the moment, actually. So I was always well prepared for this, and I diversify my money between different banks. Now, again, this is the mistake a lot of people make. They say, okay, well, let me put some money in Halifax, some in Lloyd's, some in Royal Bank of Scotland. No, it's the same banking group. It's the same bank. So, right? That's the first thing people have got to realize. Oh, no, don't worry. Mine's in this, this bank here. It's very safe. Okay. Do they make loans? Yes, they do loans. Right. Do they do mortgages? Oh, yes, they do mortgages. What about credit cards or business loan? Oh, yes, they do all of that. Okay. And you think that when everything starts to come down and there's a liquidity crisis and people can't pay their debts and mortgage, you think you're going to be able to go to that bank and withdraw your money? How do you think these banks loan? And of course, the penny starts to drop with a lot of people at that point. Yeah, it's a crucial one. So having a little bit of diversification with your cash, but also getting cash out of the system. Gold and silver has been money for thousands and thousands of years. It really has. It's one of the oldest forms of money, actually. So I definitely can suggest, I'm not going to make any financial recommendations, but I would definitely can suggest silver and gold. And on my YouTube channel, I've actually got a full training playlist for how to get into silver and gold, how to, buy them, where to buy them, different vaults for different countries, different companies, what sort of denominations. It's all on my channel.
You mentioned there about we talked about silver and gold, and there's some guidance on that. People will be sitting here at the moment with with money in pension schemes. They may, I know crypto has become very popular. What are your thoughts about how things like pensions in the stock market, how maybe crypto might be impacted moving forward, and what's a sensible thing to do with your money?
Yeah, just one thing on pensions. I actually did a very in-depth study. It's a documentary on my YouTube channel again on pensions. I recommend every single person watch that video. It will shock you into some action, I think. In essence, they're taking, because it's not their money, you see, the managers who are responsible, it's not their money. So they take very high risk and it's a strange one. Why do they take the high risk? Because if they don't take the risk, the fund will move their pension elsewhere. So in a way, the fund is causing the issue as well. If they'd have just said, look, just get a 6%, 7%, something like that, keep it fairly safe, then easy. But no, they say, we need 12%, we need 14%, give us more risky investments because we've got all these people retiring and we haven't got enough people coming in at the bottom, and all this other stuff. So it's a vicious cycle, and everyone's a little bit to blame, apart from the people who are trusting their pension is safe and they have no idea what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. So does this suggest that you might be better off taking your pension into your own hands?
I think it's up to each individual. All I can tell you is a lot of the people I mentor, a lot of clients, they do things like they take their pension out. Obviously, you have to be careful because there's tax liabilities if you take it out early, and they might buy a property. They might buy a property and then that's their pension. They rent it out to a nice family, make a nice house, and that's how they see their pension for when they retire. There's a lot of options. You've just got to know, you've really just got to understand how to invest. And I would say now, this period right now that we're in is one of the most difficult periods ever in history to know how to invest. It's almost as difficult as the 1920s or the 1970s period of stagflation. It's almost that difficult right now.
Yeah. Any thoughts on crypto? Where should that fit into people's portfolios or not?
Well, I can only tell you I have exposure to crypto, so I have a fairly substantial amount. It accounts for about 15% of my portfolio. But when I bought it, it was only about 5% of my portfolio. And just through good investments and doing good security analysis on different cryptos, I've managed to grow that up to about 15%. I think it's lower right now because the markets obviously went down. That was unexpected. We weren't expecting that until around now, actually. It was roughly about March of 2022 when most of us expected the market to go down. We did not expect it to go down in winter last year. It was just, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah. So suppose the question for people to think, is it a good time to be buying in now while it's low, or is that not a low? We don't know, do we? We just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if I had no exposure right now and I had some capital, if I can stake that crypto and get 12%, or some of them like KSM give you 18%, and they're good projects, or something like Polkadot giving you 12% right now on Kraken, or you've got other platforms, Nexo giving 7%, I think it is, on Bitcoin, and things like that. It's all about knowing. You see, knowledge is key. Without the knowledge, most people, they can't take an action.
Yeah.
And some people say, well, I'm just not sure what to do. Whether you take an action or not, you're still taking an action. You see, I actually see an inaction as an action. Wrapping you up in words here, but that's how I see it. If you don't take any action, well, the action you're taking is to let inflation eat away at your capital.
Yeah.
So if I can get whatever percent by staking rewards, which is basically a liquidity provider, I won't go into it, it'll take us 10 minutes, but it's a liquidity provider, then it's going to just help me to protect, especially some of the cryptos are at all-time lows right now. Now, you've got to know what to buy. This is the key thing. You have to know the best projects to buy. If you just go out and buy random projects, you're going to lose all your money. But if you buy really strong projects with good fundamentals, good technology, good backers, good partners, then the chances are over the next few years, you're going to make a lot of money and do very well. But that's the caveat. Most people won't know what to buy.
Yeah. What about the stock market then? It's got a couple of minutes, really, 3 minutes. What's
well,
property? Are we going into the depression you mentioned at some point?
Well, at some point, all of this is gonna hit the floor.
Yeah.
But the question is, will the central banks raise interest rates enough to fight inflation? That's the big question. I don't think they will without a fight. You see, because right now, them and everyone else in these small circles, they're very wealthy people. They are making an absolute fortune from this wealth transfer from the poor and the middle class to up the pyramid, as it were. So why would they stop doing that without some sort of an incentive? You see, everything is about incentive. It's called tipping point theory. Everything is about incentive. You give a carrot or the stick, as it were, is another way to say it. If you give people an incentive, then they will think about it. But if you've got a stick, then they're going to do it. And that's really how it works. Now, we're not at that stage, so they're not really worried. They're not bothered. They're not raising interest rates to fight the inflation. They kept saying it's transitory. It's not transitory. It's now becoming embedded. And with everything else converging, you're going to see more inflation. I remember last month when the figures were coming out for America, and I said, these figures, and you had all these world experts, Nobel winning prize, blah, blah, blah. And they give you a 10-minute introduction on the guy. Okay, great. Just tell me what you think inflation is going to be. If it goes above 5.2%, I'll give back my Nobel Prize. I laughed. I had my tea. I spat my tea all over the place because I was like, okay, you're about to see 7.5% inflation, my friend. And they were all coming on 5%, 5.1%. And then when the numbers came out, 7.4%, they were shocked. They didn't know what to say. And again, they all said again this month, oh, we're probably going to see 6.9%. I said 8%. We're going to see 8%. And what do we see? 7.9%. So, 0.1% off each time. I need to work on that a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, Neil, we've got to leave you now. Brilliant having you back on the show again. Just lots of wisdom, insight. And I know with you that you do this work and you are prepared to put yourself on this platform because actually you just want to help. You want to help people. And you don't want to see people falling flat on their face. So I know with you it comes with great intention. So, thank you.